The first Qibla for this Ummah, the second Masjid to be established on earth, and our third holiest place. And for centuries, a most holy place exclusively allocated for Muslim prayer. It's been 5 months since matters boiled over most lately and prominently at Masjid al-Aqsa, and the spark lit at the masjid in the dying days of Ramadan mobilized a steadfast resistance in Palestine and conscientized the spirit of the Ummah. The rank and file of the Muslim world at the time clearly made its sentiments heard. Al-Aqsa is a red line, and hands off Al-Aqsa. The planned incursion of Al-Aqsa on the 28th of Ramadan was foiled. Yet, 5 months later, the same forces have remobilized and in the intervening period have taken strident steps to alter the balance at Masjid al-Aqsa, provocations which sadly have gone unnoticed and unchecked by the Muslim world. Tonight, on a common platform, we unite again for Masjid al-Aqsa, evaluate the grave reports reaching us from Al-Quds, and strategize on what we can do differently this time round. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And from South Africa to the world, welcome to the simulcast Al-Aqsa in Danger. My name is Ibrahim Musa, and this broadcast comes to you courtesy of the United Ulama Council of South Africa, the Muslim Judicial Council, the Al-Quds Foundation South Africa, the Palestine Information Network, and many other partners in the solidarity space, inviting an audience across multiple Muslim media platforms: Radio Al-Ansar in KwaZulu-Natal, Radio Islam International in Gauteng, and beaming out to the world as well, Salam Media streaming worldwide, Channel Islam International on free-to-air platforms, DSTV, as well as beaming out to the world, the Hijazi channel, and the Voice of the Cape FM streaming worldwide, as well as on FM frequencies in the Western Cape. And our key focus tonight is the recent Israeli court ruling validating silent Jewish prayer at Masjid al-Aqsa and its consequences for the Muslim world and the status quo of Palestine and Masjid al-Aqsa. And joining us is an erudite panel comprising of Sheikh Ibrahim Gabriels. He is the president of the Al-Quds Foundation South Africa, and Dr. Abdullah Ma'roof. He's an author and researcher in Jerusalem Studies, assistant professor at Istanbul 29 Mayıs University in Istanbul, and it's facilitated by myself, an anchor at Radio Islam International and researcher at the Palestine Information Network. We are going to be connecting with Dr. Abdullah in a short while from now, and he has a limited time with us this evening as well. But to kick off the discussion this evening and to set the tone for the discussion, Sheikh Ibrahim Gabriel. Sheikh, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Hafiz Ibrahim, and to all the listeners and viewers of all the different radio stations and ITV stations, whichever media. We greet you all with universal greetings of love and peace and honor and respect and mercy. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sheikh, and an absolute pleasure seeing your radiant face, mashallah, and obviously responding to the call at this critical hour. For people who have been old enough, Sheikh, and the older you are, the more people would realize that there have been emergency calls for Masjid al-Aqsa, whether it was a radio show, whether it was some Zoom seminar in recent days, or whether it was the more traditional community hall meeting back in the day, the picketeering, the pamphleteering, and the mass rallies. A person who has gone through the cycle many more times than others might say, we've heard all of this before. What is going to be different this time round? What are we going to hear different? What should we look forward to, or what our approach to this discussion should be different this time round? What would you say to that, to open up and set the tone for our discussion, very critical discussion as it is this evening, Sheikh?
Yeah, in fact, I think that's a good area to start because we want to tell the world, and especially the Muslims, and especially the peace-loving people of the world, that this time around, we need to up our efforts and our sacrifices and time for the Palestinian issue. This time around, because what the atrocities that has happened in the recent Ramadan against the Muslims who were in the month of Ramadan, in the state of connecting with Allah in the Salah, they were harassed, they were shot with gas canisters and so many other things. So I think this time around, people shouldn't ask, are we again speaking about Palestine? No, no, people must not actually say, uh, when are the leaders going to say something and stand up and have radio programs and TV programs? Because there is a clear intention from the Zionist groups and politicians to escalate the attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque. And this is done in small steps, like the ruling of the Israeli court, to avoid anger from within and from outside of Palestine. And I think that is important to take note of. They want to avoid the anger because in a few years ago, when they have any Talmudic prayer in the Al-Aqsa a sacred mosque, there will be intifada in Palestine. And so this new attempted strategy is now to make use of the Israeli courts to legalize their prayers in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And this decision would allow the Zionist groups who are trying to destroy Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. We mustn't forget that. These are all attempts to destroy Masjid Al-Aqsa, because that is what it's all about. So these type of rulings of the courts gives them to be more daring and vicious in their attacks. And this comes at a time when the Israeli politics are dominated by the right-wing politicians, who has given lots of focus around the issue of Masjid al-Aqsa. And they are supported by Zionists from all over the world, supporting this project financially and socially. And with the current Middle East political scene and the unfortunate and despicable normalization of the Arab states, it gives the Zionist entity and the Israeli occupation the notion that they have so-called more power and have weaker opposition. So this is now the time for the Muslims right around the world to intensify the support for the protection of, like you've said at the beginning, the first Qibla of the Muslim Ummah. And that is, an important point to note, because the question is, why did Allah make Masjid Aqsa to be the first Qibla? Rasulullah stayed in Makkah al-Mukarramah. But even Rasulullah, whilst being in Makkah, had to perform his salah in the direction of Masjid Aqsa. And the reason for that is so that this Ummah must never ever forget Masjid Aqsa. And now we see the importance of the slogans of Shaykh al-Aqsa, Sheikh Ra'id Salah, that is still, being treated in the harshest conditions in the oppressive Israeli prisons. Sheikh Ra'id Salah used to tell us here in South Africa and the world, Al-Aqsa fi khatar, Aqsa is in danger. Now we can see the importance of these words. We can also see the importance of the word Wallahi. In the house of Haji Yunus, this slogan is written down in his dining room. Intaha waqtul nawm, the time for sleeping is over. And I want to repeat it, the time for sleeping is over. And this we must all understand. And another slogan, Al-Aqsa laysa wahidan. Aqsa is not alone. Aqsa is not alone. We here in South Africa and we all over the world, we will give our full support, inshallah, for the protection of Masjid al-Aqsa. And Brother Hafiz Ibrahim, it's still in my heart when I heard the video, or I saw the video in the month of Ramadan, when the youth of Al-Quds said, "Nuqsimu billah al-azim an nahmi al-Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak." We have taken a pledge. We have taken a pledge that we will protect Masjid al-Aqsa. What it means is they are saying that we will give our lives, we will sacrifice our lives for the protection of Masjid al-Aqsa. Allahu Akbar. And that's so admirable of the people of Al-Quds and Palestine. Each and every Palestinian, even the people of Gaza, they can't enter Al-Quds. They are far away from Quds. But the recent happenings in the Gaza, the recent bombings in the Gaza is because of Al-Quds, is because of Masjid al-Aqsa. They have taken upon themselves to shoot the first rockets, in protection of Al-Quds, in protection of Masjid al-Aqsa. And maybe they've paid the price, but it's a worthwhile price because they are prepared to sacrifice their own lives and their own families and their own children for Masjid al-Aqsa. So Masjid al-Aqsa, as you've said, is a red line, In other words, it's a no zone, not negotiable. We as Muslims, we will stand up for Masjid al-Aqsa until Allah gives liberation. And just before I'm going to give over to you, and I see my beloved friend and colleague, Dr. Abdullah Ma'ruf, also with us, alhamdulillah. I just want to remind the world that since the martyrdom of Sheikh Ahmad Yasin 16 years ago, we made Salatul Janazah lil Ghaib, and Allah inspired us to fast every Thursday for the liberation of Masjid Aqsa, and we call that program As-Siyam Hatta Tahrir, fasting until liberation. I also want to tell you, Brother Hafiz Ibrahim and Dr. Abdullah Ma'ruf and all the listeners and viewers, that when we were in Durban last week, and when I told the people of Durban what we are doing in Cape Town about this fasting program, the ladies in Durban said, Sheikh, just send us a video, and we are going to encourage and motivate all the ladies in Durban and all the ladies on our WhatsApp chat that we are going to fast every Thursday until the liberation of Masjid Aqsa. And I think that should be the spirit. Barakallahu fikum.
Indeed, Sheikh, Jazakallah khairan for setting the tone for this very critical discussion, and a lot of the ideas that you've threshed out there at this opening. Inshallah, we'll come back to you towards the end to give us even more concrete direction, particularly to the audiences listening in South Africa this evening. If you've just joining us, this is a special broadcast across multiple platforms, facilitated by Aqsa, MJC, the Al-Quds Foundation, South Africa, and PIN, and coming to you on Al-Ansar Radio Islam International, Salam Media, Channel Islam International, the Hijazi Channel, and the Voice of the Cape FM. We've just heard opening comments from Sheikh Ibrahim Gabriels, the president of the Al-Quds Foundation, South Africa. And with us for the next few minutes, also providing very essential and important perspective, Dr. Abdullah Ma'ruf, author and researcher in Jerusalem Studies and the assistant professor at Istanbul 29 Mayis University in Istanbul. Dr. Abdullah, great to have you on with us, speaking to South Africa and the world from Istanbul. Assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam wa barakatuh. Thank you, Brother Ibrahim, and thank you, Sheikh Ibrahim Gabriel, for welcoming me here. I'm so happy to be here with you, inshallah. May Allah, inshallah, gather us again, but in our souls and bodies, inshallah, inside Masjid Al-Aqsa, all of us, inshallah. And all of the people who are watching us and listening to us, inshallah.
Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. Dr. Abdullah, we don't have that much time with you, and I'm going to lean on you specifically over the next few minutes to provide perhaps an essential explainer to the discussion, not obviously Masjid al-Aqsa, broad discussion, the history, a broad discussion, the politics, a broad discussion, but specifically the area of the silent prayer now being allowed at Masjid al-Aqsa, the role of the courts, the legal dimensions, and so forth. So very pointed questions, perhaps brief answers so that we'd be able to cover as many areas and build on this discussion. Firstly, the court, the Israeli Jerusalem Magistrates Court last week had passed this decision that has obviously caught the attention of us and the Muslim world. Can you just explain to us exactly what did the court say last Wednesday?
Yes, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Thank you again, Brother Ibrahim, for having me today, and thank you very much as well, Sheikh Ibrahim, for having me here, and thanks for all our brothers and sisters, beloved brothers and sisters in South Africa, for having this opportunity. Speaking about what happened a few days ago regarding the Israeli court issue regarding prayer, or what they call as the silent prayer. Now, we must note at the beginning, and I must stress something very important here, is that according to the studies in historical issues regarding the Palestinian cause and the issue of the Jewish prayers inside Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Israeli courts, usually the Israeli court and judicial body did not oppose the issue of prayers by the Jews from the beginning, from 1967, when the higher court of Israel issued or backed actually the idea of Jews being able to pray inside Masjid al-Aqsa. This happened many times again in 1993, in 2003, in 2006 as well. And all of these times, the highest, the Supreme Court of in Palestine, the Israeli one, actually ruled against preventing the settlers from praying inside Masjid al-Aqsa, and backed the issue of praying of Jews praying inside Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now, what is the difference between what happened in those years and the last time, as I mentioned, was 2006, and what happened a few days ago in 2021? Now, what happened here a few days ago was that the judge Bilha Yahalom, the Israeli judge in the court of Jerusalem, ruled in a specific issue, specific case related to a rabbi. This rabbi, called Ariel Libo, was derived out of Al-Aqsa Mosque and prevented by the Israeli police, by the Zionist police, from entering Al-Aqsa Mosque because he prayed inside Al-Aqsa, which, according to the Israeli police and according to the Israeli security forces, was something that could lead to eruption of troubles, if I could say, inside Masjid al-Aqsa. And this is the thing that the Israelis are afraid of most. And this is why they prevented him from entering Masjid al-Aqsa, not as a case of being standing with the right of the Palestinians and the Muslims only inside Masjid al-Aqsa, but actually to prevent any escalation in the situation inside Masjid al-Aqsa, because of the sensitivity of Masjid al-Aqsa. And everybody here must remember what happened last May, in the 28th of Ramadan, and Sheikh Ibrahim mentioned earlier how Gaza entered, and all the Palestinians actually, and all the Muslim world, not only the Palestinians, actually gathered together in this case. So the Israeli police prevented this rabbi from entering Masjid al-Aqsa, and this judge actually ruled against this action by the police. What does it mean? Usually, earlier, from 1976 until 2006, the Supreme Court of Israel used to say in their judgments and their rulings that the Jews have the right to pray inside the Temple Mount, meaning a Masjid al-Aqsa or Al-Aqsa Mosque. But, according to them, this should be, or applying this, should be according to the understanding of the police and the security branch of the Israeli government, as to apply or do not apply, or not apply this this ruling inside Masjid al-Aqsa. And that depends on the situation, the security situation inside Masjid al-Aqsa. So the Israeli police had the power to either allow the Israeli settlers to pray inside Masjid al-Aqsa or to prevent them, according to the court, to the Supreme Court. Now, what happened here is that this judge, Bilha Yahalom, ordered the Israeli police to allow this this rabbi to break into Masjid al-Aqsa and pray inside Masjid al-Aqsa, basing this on the idea of that the Israeli silent prayer is not a problem, and that it is permissible inside Masjid al-Aqsa. Now, when the Israeli police appealed this in the Central Court of Jerusalem, the Central Court of Jerusalem, I can't remember the name of that. I think the name of that person, yeah, Ariel Romanov, the judge in the Central Court. The judge of the Central Court actually accepted the appeal of the police as of only to prevent this rabbi from entering Masjid al-Aqsa, but not because he prayed inside Masjid al-Aqsa. He said, the judge said in his ruling, that the problem with the rabbi was that he did not pray silently. Well, he prayed with a loud voice, and that is the problem. So he did not actually mention that the prayer of the Jews inside Masjid al-Aqsa is not allowed. He said that it is allowed as long as it is silent. So what does that mean? It means that for the first time, the judicial the courts of the Israeli courts and the Zionist courts inside occupied Palestine are actually now backing the idea of the Israelis praying inside Masjid al-Aqsa, which is a total change of the status quo inside Masjid al-Aqsa. The status quo inside Masjid al-Aqsa say that only the Muslims have the right to enter and pray inside Masjid al-Aqsa. The Israelis afterwards, they changed something back in 2015, if you remember, when John Kerry, the former American Secretary of State during the time of Obama administration, when he entered and when he flew all the way to Palestine in order to stop the eruption of the what was called Intifada to Sakakin, the knives eruption in Palestine, or uprising in Palestine, he gave a new understanding of the status quo. He said, and that was agreed by Netanyahu and some other parties in the region. He said that the Palestinians, as the Muslims, have the right to pray inside Masjid al-Aqsa, and he used the term the Temple Mount as well, in order to show that he was speaking about all the area which is called Masjid al-Aqsa, and the Israelis call it the Temple Mount. He said the Muslims have the right, the sole right to pray inside Masjid al-Aqsa, and the Israelis, he said that they have the right to enter and visit only, not to pray inside Masjid al-Aqsa. Now the Israelis are even taking this to the next level, and they are trying now, backed by the court judgment now, and they are trying to go to the next level, which is to allow the Israelis to pray inside Masjid al-Aqsa silently. What is the difference between praying silently or praying publicly? Nothing. It's a prayer. So it is a violation of the international law. It is a violation of the status quo. It is a violation for everything that has been done inside Masjid al-Aqsa, and it is a violation for all the situation in Masjid al-Aqsa since 1967. So there is no difference between praying silently or praying publicly inside Masjid al-Aqsa. Praying is praying. Once an Israeli settler come inside Masjid al-Aqsa and start worshipping or praying inside Masjid al-Aqsa, that violates the status quo of Masjid al-Aqsa, which violates the international law. This is what the Israelis are trying actually to avoid and try to take it out of context. They're trying now to manipulate us into just differentiating between the types of prayer. Praying silently, not praying publicly. Do not raise your voice with prayer, but just pray silently with your mouth shut. And some of the Israeli academics, such as Mordechai Kidar, appeared a few days ago on some channels, and he started claiming that praying by the Israeli settlers who enter Masjid al-Aqsa is nothing unusual. You cannot tell if the person is praying or not because his mouth is shut. So he's trying actually as well to manipulate us, to manipulate the whole region, and to show that there is no problem in Israelis performing their prayer without having this in public. And that is
Mhm.
actually very dangerous because it actually goes beyond the status quo and it changes everything inside Masjid al-Aqsa. We don't want to end up with what happened in Masjid al-Ibrahimi in Hebron, in Al-Khalil. And all of us knew that the Israelis used to break into Masjid al-Ibrahimi in Al-Khalil as visitors only, not after 1967. And that remained until the 90s, until the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s, during the first Intifada. During that time, the Israelis started praying inside Masjid al-Ibrahimi, first silently, then publicly, and at the end, the massacre of Masjid al-Ibrahimi happened in 1994, and this resulted in dividing the whole mosque between the Muslims and the settlers in Hebron, and this did not end at that time. And the Muslims started to be pray in their part, and the Israelis in their part, and the Israelis used to take the whole mosque for their ceremonials, worshipping, and for their feasts as well. Such as Rosh Hashanah or any other Jewish celebration or during the year, which are more than the Muslim celebrations, because the Muslims have only two Eid during the year. And after that, they ended up in 2009, when the Israeli government, the Netanyahu parliament, declared that from that moment that the Masjid al-Ibrahimi, or the Mosque of Ibrahim alayhi salam, is now considered part of the Jewish heritage, which means that legally it is now, according to the Israeli government, it is no longer a mosque, it is a synagogue. And the Muslims are allowed now to pray in the synagogue. So it's not an issue of Jews are allowed to pray in mosque. No, the Muslims now, according to the Israeli understanding of Masjid al-Ibrahimi in Hebron, the Muslims are allowed temporarily to pray in a synagogue called Masjid, or called the Grave of Abraham. So that is the thing that is happening in Hebron. We do not want to see this in Masjid al-Aqsa. If this thing just passes and the Palestinians do not do anything and the Muslim world do not do anything with regarding to the issue of praying inside Masjid al-Aqsa, then the principle of Jews praying inside Masjid al-Aqsa will be on the table and will be just done, will be something, a matter of fact. So afterwards, they will take it to the next level, which is actually to pray loudly, to pray publicly. And this what was supposed to happen in the 28th of Ramadan, last Ramadan. And if we allow that, they will start actually asking for a specific area inside Masjid al-Aqsa in order to pray, designated only for the Jews to pray inside Masjid al-Aqsa, and that means the division of Masjid al-Aqsa. The division of Masjid al-Aqsa is the end of Masjid al-Aqsa. And I'm not speaking from my own. That was said a few days ago, and I have the video. I have the video on my phone. That was said on I-24 channel by a rabbi, one of the members of the temple union, the temple union, and his name is Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. I can't remember his name. He's not here. I can't remember his name. This is the video. I have it on my phone. And he said clearly that our goal, that Al-Aqsa Mosque is only a mosque that is just to the southern area of the Temple Mount. So, and he denied that the whole area is Al-Aqsa Mosque. He said that the whole area is not a mosque. The whole area is the Temple Mount, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, yes, his name is Yaakov Hayman. He said that Al-Aqsa Mosque is just a small building at the southern part of the Temple Mount, and we don't want it. We want to build our temple at the same spot of the Dome of the Rock. We want this to be dismantled, and we would like to build our temple at the end in that area. He said this. He said it on a video. So it was public, it was published, it is until now, all of it is so clear, crystal clear. So we do not have to accept this apologetic, for example, apology from this person or that person. We cannot just accept any trial from the Israeli government or from the Israeli left or right wing to manipulate us, and that is actually a very clear issue. If we do not act, then Al-Aqsa Mosque will be gone, and that's it. I hope that this, yeah.
Absolutely, and Doctor, you spelt it out in vivid, at the same time painful detail, the implications of this, and obviously keeping that parallel of the Ibrahimi Masjid in mind. For our audience, before you go, I just want to leave you with this question. Uh, you obviously in previous discussions have pointed out that what gives the Israeli government, the settler movement, the movement, the room to move and the room to shift the status quo is purely the silence of the Muslim world. Now, in this case, you are obviously encouraging the Muslim world not to let this development go past and allow the room for the Israeli government to be able to build on this particular momentum. In that regard, how are you advocating? What are you calling, perhaps specifically to our listenership today, people in different capacities in this country and around the world, to be able to move, to be able to respond to this development, in a cohesive manner?
Well, actually, I believe that I believe that the Muslim world have to act, and by this I do not mean I'm not speaking actually to the governments. I know that the governments have their own agendas and their own ideas, but I know that there are many ways Muslims around the world can help in this issue. They can go to the street, they can go to the governments, they can go to the public opinion, they can go globally and make this issue a global issue, a global problem that needs to be done, needs to be solved immediately. What happened in 28th of Ramadan made actually the whole world just note that there was a problem, that there is a problem inside Masjid Al-Aqsa. And this actually what the Israelis are really afraid of. The Israelis do not feel afraid of a government issuing a statement saying that we condemn this or condemnation and we condemn this and we are angry with that. They're not afraid of this. They are afraid of people actually going to the ground and saying that do not accept this, and they are really afraid of this issue being publicized in the media. I know that from reading some of the social media and the other side, actually, that they bet now that the many issues like this issue, like many other issues, will just pass and people will just forget about it after the first incident that happens in any other place in the world or even in Palestine. And this is the thing that must not happen. You need to go to the media. You need to make a real pressure on Israel, and this can happen. This can happen by pressuring your politicians as well, and it can happen by putting some pressure on your media as well, in whether it was in South Africa or in the Arab world or in the other places in the Muslim world as well. We need to have something to deliver our voice to the world and make it actually an issue of public interest, an issue of a global interest. It's not an issue that is just related to the Palestinians and the Israelis. It's not an issue that is only related to the people of Jerusalem and the Israeli settlers. No, it is an issue that actually tackles and touches every single one of us. It touches every single one, whether you are in South Africa, whether you are even in Antarctica, it touches you, because Masjid Al-Aqsa is not for me because I'm Palestinian. It is for me and for you because you're a Muslim. And this is a place for Muslims, and this is a mosque for the Muslims, and Muslims did not take it from anybody. When Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, and I mentioned this many times, when Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu entered Jerusalem, he entered Jerusalem while Al-Aqsa Mosque was out of the boundaries of the city, and it was not for everybody and for anybody. It was abandoned, and Muslims did not take it from anybody. So nobody can come to us and tell us that the Muslims took it from the Jewish community or from the Christian community or from the Buddhist community community or from any other community. And Masjid al-Aqsa was abandoned and was outside, and Muslims just took this area from no one. And that is something that must be stressed many times. And it is your duty, and I'm speaking here to every single one, whether seeing me or listening to me, it is your personal duty in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to go and act, to go and speak, and to go and raise your voice with this issue. And do not think that raising your voice do not have any consequences on the ground. No, it does, because the Israelis do not like actually hearing voices that tells the truth about what happens in what is happening in Palestine and what is happening in Al-Aqsa Mosque. They do not like to hear any noises or voices that can actually interrupt the changing process of the ground in Jerusalem and inside Masjid al-Aqsa. So if you have your voice loudly and clearly to your politicians and to the world as well, and to the media, three times I say it, it will actually affect the Israeli policies, and it will affect
Yes.
the Israelis and make them actually back off from Masjid al-Aqsa, at least for some times. And this is what happened in 2017 when the Israelis put these metal detectors. They tried to put the metal detectors in front of Al-Aqsa Mosque's gates. But when the world said no, and the Muslims around the world said no, they backed off. And this is what happened as well in 2019, when the Palestinians and the Muslims as well, all over the world, stood and said, Bab al-Rahma will be opened, and it will become a prayer hall as it was before. And we will end 16 years of closing it by the Israeli forces. And now in 2021, is that 2021, it happened again in 28th of Ramadan. And afterwards, the whole world actually stood up with a Masjid al-Aqsa, and this is why Israeli backed off. And they could not actually continue the changing of the status quo as they wished. Now they are trying actually to go in a different way, by like a zigzag. They are trying just to manipulate the world and manipulate us through media, through their mixed messages. And this is something that must be understood and must be addressed. It is not actually something that we need to hold for ourselves. We need to hold and to let the world know, and the Israelis as well, and their supporters know that we understand, and we know, and we act
Okay.
accordingly.
Dr. Abdullah, I thank you tremendously for that important perspective, sketching out the importance of this discussion, a message received here from Maulana Abdul Khalik Ali, the President of the United Ulama Council of South Africa, thanking yourself and Sheikh Ibrahim, saying Dr. Abdullah's context to the current matter is brilliant and showcases the Zionists' occupiers' serious intent to steal Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak. Fortunately, that's all the time we have with you this evening. Shukran for your time, Dr. Abdullah, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much.
That was Dr. Abdullah Maroof, author and researcher in Jerusalem Studies, assistant professor at Istanbul 29 Mayis University. We've just barely got about 7 minutes to go to this discussion, and just as we started off with Sheikh Ibrahim Gabriels, the president of the Al-Quds Foundation, we conclude with Sheikh as well, and reflections firstly on what Dr. Abdullah had said, and more so the call to action here in South Africa. Sheikh, there is a notion where we have a kind of soda water effect, and it's only when we see blood and it's only when we see bombs that we kind of mobilize. And you made the very critical point in your opening comments about the gradualism of the Zionist approach. And because gradualism draws on everyday violations at Masjid al-Aqsa, this requires an everyday response to these violations at Masjid al-Aqsa. Your thoughts on building sustainability and not making the mistakes perhaps of selective or accidental or knee-jerk activism.
Yeah, Hafiz Ibrahim and dear viewers and listeners, first to comment on Dr. Abdullah Ma'roof's presentation tonight. We always benefit from Dr. Abdullah Ma'roof, subhanAllah. I can remember when he was in Cape Town, he said to us that the issue of Masjid Aqsa must be kept alive in our homes and in our families. And he, for example, advised that put a picture of the whole Masjid Aqsa, not the Dome of the Rock, the whole Masjid Aqsa, the sacred mosque, in your dining room, and you remind your children and grandchildren, say that masjid belongs to all of us. That is the first keeper of the Muslim Ummah, and it is the responsibility of each and every Muslim. And he said to us, your next Eid, you say to your brother or your sister or your cousin or your friend or your neighbor, Eid Mubarak, and may Allah grant that your next Eid is going to be in Masjid Aqsa. Allahu Akbar. So I love what he said. Go to the streets, go to your politicians, make it a global issue, and that the Israelis are not afraid. I think we must capture these words. The Israelis are not afraid of government statements, but they are afraid of people standing up. They are afraid of the voices of the people, of the world, and go to the social media. We want to encourage everybody, and especially the youth, to make use of the social media and put pressure on the Israelis. Dr. Abdullah Ma'ruf says, make it your personal duty. And these are powerful words, because why is it a personal duty? Because Allah is going to ask us the day of Qiyamah, what did you do for Masjid Aqsa? Muslim. You lived at a time when Masjid Aqsa was under siege. Subhanallah. So yes, Hafiz Ibrahim, we want to motivate and encourage everybody, as I said at the beginning, that this time around, I can't stop saying this. This time around, we need to focus and support the Palestinian issue on a continuous basis. I love what Dr. Umar Suleiman said from the United States of America. Please continue to speak about Palestine. Okay, we know what happened in the month of Ramadan, and many of us have stopped. Alhamdulillah, with the barakah of these type of programs, we are going to, inshallah, raise our voices again. And I would like to inform Hafiz Ibrahim and listeners and viewers, those who are assigned from the Zionists to listen to these type of radio programs of ours, that Masjid Aqsa, you can tell your bosses that Masjid Aqsa, as you correctly said, is a red line. It's a no-go zone area. It's not negotiable. We will continue to stand up for Masjid Aqsa. And yes, I liked what Dr. Abdullah Ma'ruf said about Masjid Khalil, because I also made in my preparations note of it, that when Masjid Khalil in Hebron was like taken over by the Israelis, we were asleep. So you can tell your bosses, this time around we are not asleep. We're not going to allow it again, that you make your loud praise and all your silent praise in Masjid Aqsa. Not only the people of Palestine is going to stand up, we here in South Africa and in Southern Africa and right around the world, we will stand up and make sure that you don't even have your silent praise in Masjid Aqsa. It is against international law, right? And so maybe in conclusion, I want to say that I think that it is important for the peace-loving people of the world, not only the Muslims, to stand up for justice, and on a continuous basis and a consistent basis. And we need to continue our efforts and concerns around Masjid Aqsa, and as I've said, take the advice of Dr. Abdullah Ma'ruf. Place that Masjid Aqsa in your front room, and every time and almost on a daily basis, you remind yourself and you remind your children about the issue of Masjid Aqsa. I referred earlier, Brother Ibrahim, Hafiz Ibrahim, about our visit to Durban, Khalik. And in Durban, I met a sister. I'm not going to say her name now. That somebody informed me that every day she dedicates 2 hours to the issue of Palestine. She makes research, and she's so busy on Twitter, Instagram, and all social media about putting on social media issues about Palestine, what is happening in Palestine. And I think we can learn from our sister there in Durban, how if you can't dedicate 2 hours, at least 30 minutes or 60 minutes of your time for Masjid Aqsa, Brother Hafiz Ibrahim, Jazakumullah khairan for putting together this program. May Allah bless you. May Allah bless all of us. And may Allah grant us soon that we are all going to make Salah in Masjid Aqsa Mubarak. Ameen Ya Rabbil Alameen.
I mean, Ya Rabbal Alameen, the president of the Al-Quds Foundation of South Africa and seasoned South African scholar, Sheikh Ibrahim Gabriel, Jazakallah khairan for your time in joining us on this nationwide simulcast. We also thank all the participating institutions, the United Ulama Council of South Africa, the Muslim Judicial Council, Al-Quds Foundation South Africa, Palestine Information Network, and the various platforms who, while many across the world have been perhaps quite ambivalent to these developments, have responded to the call most enthusiastically. Very many thanks to you at Radio Islam International, Radio Al Ansar, Channel Islam International, Salam Media, the Hijazi Channel, and the Voice of the Cape FM. A rich treasury of ideas to be able to implement, to be able to become much more active at this critical hour for Masjid al-Aqsa. At the end, we do believe that the light will shine through the tunnel, as we so vividly saw recently within the land of Palestine itself. And it is only our prayer to the Almighty that He uses us for this cause and does not substitute us. Till we meet again, Jazakallah khairan to all for joining us on this special broadcast, Al-Aqsa in Danger. It's been a nationwide simulcast. From myself, Ibrahim Musa, as well as everybody else behind the scenes, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.